What exactly are we talking about when we talk about a retool for the Boston Bruins?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Beat. Today is Friday, January 17th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do smash that subscribe button if you have not already so that you do not miss a thing. Today on the program, we are going to preview tomorrow's pivotal game against the Ottawa Senators, and we'll also take a look at what exactly is meant by retooling. Yesterday on the podcast, I looked at Cam Neely's comments about two paths facing this team at the moment, whether or not they want to try to go and build the roster to succeed this season, or whether or not they begin to look a bit forward and retool. And the Washington Capitals provide a great example of that, as we will see. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. Side note, I have a very important job interview this afternoon, Friday at 2 p.m. So if you are the positive vibe sending kind, please send them all my way. Also, my son's playing in a basketball tournament this weekend. Very excited about that. He's got 4 games on tap. So good luck to Ewan and the Griffins. All right, so a retool, what exactly would that look like? Shayna Goldman from The Athletic had a great article the other day about how the Capitals retooled on the fly and how that provides a message or a plan, in a sense, for some of these middling teams in the NHL, of which the Bruins certainly are one. And funnily enough, it was the Bruins who actually helped kickstart the retool for the Washington Capitals. 2 years ago, the Bruins traded a first rounder, a third rounder, a second rounder, and Craig Smith to Washington for Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov. A few days later, the Capitals traded Eric Gustafsson and that 2023 first rounder acquired from Boston to Toronto in exchange for Rasmus Sandin, who's become a very key part of the blue line for the Capitals. Then they flipped Marcus Johansson to Minnesota for a third rounder, Lars Eller to Colorado for a second round pick, and that was just the beginning. It went on to include bringing in a hot new coach in Spencer Carberry, adding Matt Roy, Logan Thompson, betting on some reclamation projects like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Andrew Mangiapane, Jacob Chychrun. It also involved the breakout from some young prospects in Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas. You could argue it even goes back to when they took a chance on Dylan Strome. And longtime listeners of this podcast will remember that I was very much interested in the Bruins taking a chance on Dylan Strome when it was clear that he was not going to have a long-term place with the Chicago Blackhawks. Even the Tampa Bay Lightning made a bold move in the summer, saying goodbye to Steven Stamkos, trading Mikhail Sergachev, signing Jake Gensel, bringing in Connor Geekie as a long-term prospect with a lot of upside. These are a couple teams that you can look at as successful recent retools. So where it begins for the Bruins is assessing who your core players are. Obviously, we have Brad Marchand as your captain, and while it's possible he could go the Steven Stamkos route, it's more likely that he will be retained, re-signed, and he will end his tenure as a member of the Boston Bruins. That's what I hope, anyways. More on the younger side of things, you have Charlie McAvoy as a franchise-type defenseman, David Pastrnak as your elite franchise forward, Jeremy Swayman, who is showing once again that he is the guy in net for this team, basically stealing the last two wins against Florida and Tampa Bay. I'd argue Hampus Lindholm would be in that mix as a key player as well as a core player. But beyond that, I don't know who you could pinpoint as key core players for this team that are 100% immovable. Now, having said that, there are certain no trade protections and no move clauses that would make it difficult to retool or flip some of these guys. You look at your Elias Lindholms, who just signed that 7-year contract that brings a cap hit of $7.75 million. He's already 30 years old. He's got a full no move clause, and he's not going anywhere. So the Bruins have already pinpointed him as a core player moving forward, like it or not. Then you have, of course, Nikita Zadorov, who was signed to that 5-year, 5-year, $30 million or $25 million contract, $5 million AAV for the next 4 seasons after this one. That's a tough pill to swallow as well. And then you have, of course, Hampus Lindholm signed till 2029-30. Other than that, there is some flexibility. Charlie Coyle will become a UFA after next season. Pavel Zacha has 2 years remaining after this one on his current contract. You just re-signed Marcus Delic for 3 seasons after this one. On the blue line, you have Brandon Carlo, signed for 2 seasons after this one. If you're looking at key core players moving forward and who could potentially be moved, on the veteran side of things, you have to think perhaps Charlie Coyle could draw some attention on the trade market, although, again, he has some no trade protection. From 2022 to 2025, he's got an 8-team no trade list. So it's not super limiting. The Bruins could certainly find a trade partner that's not on that list. When it comes to Brandon Carlo, he has a 10-team no trade list. So again, kind of limiting, but doesn't close the door on all the options. And they certainly could look to trade him to one of those available teams, as well as Charlie Coyle. That's the kind of more aggressive move you're looking at when it comes to a retool. Not to mention the pending UFAs and RFAs. We'll discuss those guys coming up in a moment. But when you're looking at a retool, it means looking ahead and not getting stuck in thinking that you are going to be a contender each and every year, and that if you're even on the bubble of the playoffs, you should be buyers and try to go all in. It's understanding your current roster's weaknesses, restocking assets, balancing long-term development with short-term goals. So it's not a full rebuild. A retool keeps the core competitive while making strategic changes. And to begin that, you retain your core players, re-sign Brad Marchand. You have Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Jeremy Swayman, Hampus Lindholm signed long-term. You're kind of stuck with Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. Other than that, you consider trading veteran players with contracts set to expire soon or declining production to gain some sort of compensation in return. Draft picks, prospects, even just some cap space for the summer. And that's where this team needs to start. Identify your core players and consider all the alternatives when it comes to making a trade and shedding some cap space for this summer and perhaps also recalling some young guys to give them some experience. And we'll keep going on this theme here as the podcast continues. The NFL playoffs are fully underway, and it's a big weekend, of course. And from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is so easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. So whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button if you have not already. So I mentioned earlier, part of Washington's retool was that trade with the Boston Bruins. They got a first-round pick, among other picks, even a 2025 second-round pick. The Bruins gave up in that one. That first-round pick was flipped by the Capitals to Toronto, along with Eric Gustafsson for Rasmus Sandin. So it's not just getting picks. It's also using those picks perhaps to not add a rental, but to add a core player for your team moving forward. That first-round pick, I should add, was Easton Cowan, who has been an amazing player at the junior level for the London Knights and could turn into a nice player for the Maple Leafs at some point. The Bruins have been very aggressive, deadline after deadline. The prospect pool and draft capital certainly needs some replenishment. So trading some mid-tier veterans or pending free agents for picks in upcoming drafts could certainly help restock the cupboard. And you look at pending unrestricted free agents like Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau, Cole Koepke, Vinny Lettieri. These are guys that could draw interest from teams better positioned for success in the playoffs. Certainly a guy like Trent Frederick, if he were to be made available, I bet you could get a nice little package for him. And my contention is, as we near the March 7th trade deadline, if it becomes clear that Trent Frederick isn't going to re-sign with the Boston Bruins, then he should be traded. It would make no sense to keep him around as a quote-unquote internal rental for a playoff push when, let's be honest, even if the Bruins do qualify for the playoffs, are they actual Stanley Cup contenders? Yes, anything can happen once you get there, but I mean, let's be realistic here. This team is not really positioned to win a Stanley Cup this year. They could get some nice prospects or picks for next season and not commit to a guy who's been somewhat disappointing this year in Trent Frederick. You have restricted free agents in Morgan Geekie, Oliver Wahlstrom, John Beecher, Mason Lohrei. I don't think he's going anywhere. I would expect them to re-sign Beecher, probably Geekie as well, who's really come on as of late, but you never know. These are all guys who could command some attention, and if a team comes calling with a nice package, you have to consider it. You could free up some cap space. You could retain some salary to clear cap room. They're already retaining on, or Jonas Korpisalo's already being retained by Ottawa a little bit. Maybe you trade him to a team that is looking for some goaltending for the playoffs and get rid of that contract that they're stuck with for the next 3 seasons after this one. Do you really want to be paying him $3 million for the next 3 seasons when Jeremy Swayman is your clear number 1 goalie? I don't think so. They need to find some scoring. They need to add some true depth. And perhaps by subtracting some guys off the main roster, you could better identify players in Providence who could be effective at the NHL level. It's coming to a point with Georgi Merkulov, Fabian Lysell, that these guys aren't going to want to play in the AHL forever. They got a bit of a taste this season, and they're going to want to come up and prove that they can hang at the NHL level. And if the Bruins aren't going to give them that opportunity, it's very possible that they could say, okay, move me somewhere where they're going to give me more of a shot. So by clearing out some veteran players, you can call these guys up, give them some important experience down the stretch, what it means to fight for a playoff spot. Hey, if they sneak in, they can get some great experience. Cam Neely said the other day, if you're thinking about calling up some of these guys, do their offensive contributions outweigh their mistakes? Buddy, you have the second worst goal differential in the Eastern Conference right now. So the guys that are up there, it's not happening for them. So you might as well see what you have in these guys before they either get fed up and ask out, or before you lose them as free agents. So a retool looks like trading assets like a Trent Frederick, trying to see perhaps if you can find homes for Brandon Carlo or Charlie Coyle, pursuing trade targets that fit their needs, young center perhaps, a high-end draft picks, prospects, undervalued players in other organizations that could thrive in Boston's system. You look at other players around the league who are unhappy, like a Zach Jones in New York, for example. A successful retool would allow the Bruins to remain playoff contenders, but building a stronger secondary base for the future. They already have a very nice foundation in Swayman, McAvoy, Lindholm, Hampus, and Pasternak. Hopefully you can get more out of Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov. You have up-and-comers like Mason Lohrei. I would argue Justin Brazeau has earned a shot to stick around with the Boston Bruins. But beyond that, they should be able and willing to explore other options or explore moving some players if other teams come calling. It's a balancing act, but with good management and some strategic decisions, the Bruins could navigate this phase effectively. Do we trust Don Sweeney and Cam Neely to do that? Well, to his credit, Don Sweeney has been pretty good on the trade market. It's probably his strongest area as Bruins GM. Much better than drafting, of course. And free agent signings have been somewhat more miss than hit. But Charlie Jacobs gave them a vote of confidence the other day, and it appears as though they will be the ones navigating this transition time. It also means that they'll be in charge of finding the next coach for the Boston Bruins, whether it's Joe Sacco or they go a more tantalizing route like the Capitals did in bringing in Spencer Carberry. So that's what a retool might look like for the Boston Bruins. They are still in playoff contention, but barely, and they're outside the top 8 right now when it comes to point percentage. There's a big game on tap tomorrow against the Ottawa Senators, and we'll preview that one here as the podcast continues. Bruins, Senators in Ottawa tomorrow afternoon. I would have loved to have traveled back to the town in which I grew up to watch this one, but alas, like I mentioned, my kid has a basketball tournament this weekend, and one of the games starts at 2:30, so I probably will miss the beginning of this game, which is a 3 p.m. start in Ottawa. The Senators are coming off a 1-0 loss to the Washington Capitals on Thursday. And if you haven't been paying attention to the Senators lately, they have a goaltender in Levi Merlainen who has been absolutely lights out as of late. Like ridiculously lights out. I picked him up on my fantasy team for this week. Unfortunately, my opponent has Logan Thompson, who has been even better than Merlainen this week somehow. But peep these save percentages over his last 4 games. A shutout win over the Penguins on January 11th. He allowed 2 goals in a win over the Dallas Stars on the 12th. That's back-to-back games. He had a shutout win over the Islanders on the 14th. And then that 1-0 overtime loss last night. So that's 1,000 save percentage or 100 save percentage, 923, 100, 963 over his last 4 starts in 10 games. In 8 games this season, he is 5-2-1 with a 930 save percentage. Not bad for a 3rd-round pick back in 2020. Now, the Senators do have a back-to-back situation this weekend, so we'll see if they go with the hot hand for the game against the Bruins or give Anton Forsberg the start. Linus Ullmark, of course, is injured week to week right now. The Bruins could get Anton Forsberg, and that would be a blessing because he's got an 883 save percentage. The Senators did ride Merlainen back-to-back last weekend, so that certainly is a possibility. Ottawa right now is 22, 18, and 4. And they are right in the thick of it when it comes to the Eastern Conference playoff race. They picked up a point last night. And as we look at the updated standings, the Senators are 1 point back of the Bruins for the second wildcard spot, but they have 2 games in hand. So this is a pivotal matchup for the Bruins tomorrow afternoon in order to stay ahead of the Senators. In terms of point percentage, the Bruins are behind Ottawa, who's in 8th, the Canadiens, who are tied with a similar or identical point percentage to Ottawa. The Columbus Blue Jackets have actually won 6 in a row, and they're up to 7th in terms of point percentage in the Eastern Conference at the moment. The Bruins are 10th at the moment, barely holding on ahead of the Detroit Red Wings, who are 8-2 over their past 10. The New York Rangers are having a bit of a resurgence. So the Bruins cannot afford to drop a game to the Ottawa Senators. Again, they still have the second worst goal differential in the Eastern Conference. These teams played on November 9th. It was a 3-2 win for Ottawa. They'll play 2 more times after this one, including a game next week back in Boston on the 23rd. The Senators have the 24th ranked offense in the NHL, 2.82 goals per game, still ahead of the Bruins, who are at 2.65. Their defense, though, is very good. They're allowing only 2.73 goals per game, which is 7th. The Bruins are still at 3.13, which is 22nd. Ottawa's power play is not bad. They rank 11th. Their penalty kill ranks 19th. And Boston's power play still 30th ranked. Penalty kill is 25th. Over the past 5 games, the Senators are led in scoring by Claude Giroux, who's got 4 assists. Tim Stützle with 2 goals. Again, they were shut out last night. David Pastrnak leads the way for the Bruins with 5 goals, 3 assists over his past 5 games. Senators are led in scoring by Stützle, 43 points. Drake Batherson, Brady Tkachuk with 38 points. Claude Giroux, 28, chipping in as the veteran there. Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot on the back end, chipping in offensively for this team. They're 4-4-2 over their past 10. They had won 3 in a row heading into last night. But again, that 1-0 overtime loss to the Washington Capitals really set them back a little bit. The Bruins coming in a bit hot. 2 straight wins over Florida and Tampa, but they were largely outplayed in those 2 games. Don't forget. The Senators have a positive goal differential. Right now, there are 8 teams in the Eastern Conference with positive goal differentials, obviously an indicator of success. And those right now are your top 8 teams when it comes to point percentage. The Montreal Canadiens, Senators, I mentioned, are tied at 545. Ottawa's +3. Canadiens are -10. And the Bruins are still at -22, which is second worst in the Eastern Conference. So the way the Bruins offense is going lately, the way their defense allowed a ton of shots the last couple games against Tampa, Jeremy Swayman's going to need to step up real big again in this one, especially if it's Merilainen in net. In order to go toe-to-toe with him, he's going to have to be on top of his game. Then after this one, it's a busy week for the Bruins next week, as we have mentioned. So on Monday, I'll be back to recap whatever happens against the Senators on Saturday. We will also preview. You know what? I might jump on a bit earlier because the Bruins play at 1 p.m. on Monday afternoon against the San Jose Sharks. So I'll probably jump on and record maybe Sunday evening, so that's ready for you guys to listen to on Monday morning. And then back-to-back next Wednesday, Thursday in New Jersey against the Senators, and then they play Colorado on next Saturday afternoon. It's going to be a busy stretch here for the Bruins. You're going to want to subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins to stay on top of all the latest. Free on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Fantasy Hockey, which you need to check out next to get the edge over the competition this week. Again, please send positive vibes for my interview this afternoon to my kid for his basketball tournament over the weekend. And please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.